Mike Tyson cruised down the quiet streets, his vintage black convertible humming beneath him. The car wasn't just a vehicle, it was a symbol of his journey, a reminder of the battles he had fought, both in and out of the ring. Pulling into the parking lot of a small diner, he stepped out, breathing in the crisp morning air. But before he could take another step, a figure approached. Officer Craig, a man whose badge gave him power, but his prejudice defined how he used it. His eyes locked onto the car, then onto Mike. Suspicion flickered. To Craig, a black man driving a car like that could mean only one thing. It wasn't his. Craig, mocking. "That's a nice ride. Where'd you steal it?" Mike, calm as ever, met his gaze. "It's mine." Craig sneered, stepping closer. Then, crack. His baton slammed against the hood, the impact ringing through the parking lot. Heads turned, phones came out. Mike's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. Craig smirked, taking it further. He lit a cigarette, took a slow drag, then, flick. The burning ember landed inside the car. A spark, a flame. Craig crossed his arms, watching the fire take hold. He had no idea he just ignited something much worse. Mike Tyson had spent his life fighting, and now, Craig was about to learn what happens when you push the wrong man too far. Subscribe and like to see what happens next. The morning sun painted the sky in shades of gold as the quiet suburb slowly came to life. Birds chirped. The breeze whispered through the trees. It was a picture of serenity. Inside his home, Mike Tyson lay still, his breathing steady. His eyes flickered open as the soft morning light filtered through the curtains. Even in retirement, his body moved like a machine, conditioned by years of discipline, training, and battle. He stretched, muscles rippling under his skin, a silent reminder of the power that once ruled the boxing world. This was his peace, a life earned, a life deserved. But on this morning, peace was only an illusion. Because outside, in a diner parking lot not far away, trouble was waiting. Mike stretched, rolling his shoulders, a quiet reminder of the strength that had once made him an unstoppable force in the ring. Stepping out into the driveway, his eyes landed on his most prized possession, his vintage black convertible. Under the morning sun, its polished surface gleamed like a trophy, a testament to the battles he had fought, the sacrifices he had made. He ran a hand over the smooth curves of the hood, the cool metal beneath his fingers grounding him in the present. This wasn't just a car, it was proof of his journey. Sliding into the driver's seat, he turned the key. The engine roared to life, a deep, powerful purr that sent vibrations through his chest. Mike Tyson was a man of action, and today, like every other, started with a simple drive. But what he didn't know, this wasn't going to be just another day. Mike navigated the quiet streets, his hands steady on the wheel as his classic convertible glided effortlessly through the neighborhood. The rhythmic purr of the engine blended with the morning stillness, a sound as smooth as the man behind the wheel. His destination, a small local diner, a place where the food was hearty, the coffee strong, and the mornings peaceful. As he pulled into the parking lot, he parked with effortless precision, stepping out with his usual calm demeanor. Some passers-by took notice, a flicker of recognition in their eyes. To many, he was a legend, a symbol of power, resilience, and triumph. To others, he was an outsider, a black man in a predominantly white neighborhood. Whispers floated through the air, cautious eyes trailing his every move. Mike ignored them. He had fought battles far greater than judgmental stares. Stepping inside, the soft chime of the doorbell echoed through the diner. The scent of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee filled the air. For Mike Tyson, this was just breakfast. But for one man, this was an opportunity to stir trouble where none existed. The door chime echoed softly as Mike stepped inside. The familiar warmth of the diner wrapped around him, the scent of fresh coffee and crispy bacon filling the air. Behind the counter, Millie, the seasoned waitress who had worked here for years, looked up, and her face instantly lit up. Millie, grinning. Wow, if it isn't Mike Tyson! What a surprise! How are you, dear? Mike chuckled, the kind of laugh that came easy in places like this. Doing just fine, Millie. You still making those pancakes like magic? Millie, laughing. You know I am, Mike. Take a seat. Mike slid into his usual booth, the leather seat molding comfortably beneath him. As he leaned back, he inhaled the familiar scent of Millie's signature pancakes, a taste he'd come to appreciate over the years. But just as he reached for the menu, something outside caught his eye. A patrol car, black and white, slow and deliberate, rolling to a stop in the parking lot. Mike's easygoing smile faded slightly as his instincts kicked in. Something was coming. The patrol car came to a slow, deliberate stop. The door creaked open, and out stepped Officer Craig, his badge gleaming under the morning sun, a stark reminder of the authority he carried. But it wasn't the badge that spoke the loudest. It was the look in his eyes, a mix of resentment, prejudice, and barely contained hostility. His gaze locked onto Mike's vintage convertible, its polished surface catching the sunlight like a beacon of success. Something inside him twisted. Envy, anger, disdain. To Craig, that car wasn't just metal and chrome. It was a challenge. A statement that a man like Mike Tyson shouldn't have something so fine. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched. With purpose in his stride, he moved in. Craig's steps were heavy, loaded with barely contained aggression as he closed in on the car. In his mind, the story had already been written. A flashy car, a black man behind the wheel. It had to be stolen. Craig's fingers twitched near his baton as he circled the vehicle slowly, deliberately, his eyes roaming over the polished surface like a predator sizing up its prey. He muttered under his breath, venom dripping from every word. Craig, low, sneering. Who does this guy think he is, driving around in something like this? Where'd he steal it from? His resentment burned hotter with each step. Because in Craig's world, men like Mike Tyson weren't supposed to win. Craig's fingers traced along the edge of the car as he circled it, his every movement oozing with contempt. This wasn't an inspection. It was a hunt. His jaw clenched, his mind already made up. Craig, muttering low growl. No way someone like him owns this. Must be stolen. His prejudice twisted the facts, turning success into suspicion. In his eyes, Mike wasn't a champion. He was just another guy, playing rich in a world that wasn't meant for him. Craig sneered, his thoughts growing darker. Craig. These people think they can do whatever they want, strutting around with their fancy things. Not on my watch. His decision was set. With one final glare at the car, he turned toward the diner, storming forward, ready to confront Mike with accusations built on nothing but his own hate. Mike savored the last bite of Millie's famous pancakes, the warm, buttery flavor melting in his mouth. He leaned back, satisfied, letting the moment stretch a little longer. But then, movement outside caught his eye. Through the diner window, he spotted Officer Craig. The man was circling his car like a vulture, his eyes filled with something dark, hostility, suspicion. For a moment, Mike's gaze lingered, tracing the officer's movements with a mix of curiosity and caution. Then he shook it off. He'd seen looks like that before. He refused to live in paranoia. Turning back to Millie, he flashed a casual, easygoing smile. Mike, grinning. Those were amazing, Millie. How do you manage to make them this good every time? Millie, laughing. It's a secret, champ, and I ain't sharing. Mike chuckled, pushing back from the table. He left a tip, gave Millie a nod, and headed toward the door. But as he stepped into the morning light, the warmth of the diner faded, and the weight of Craig's gaze was waiting for him. Mike stepped outside, the cool morning air greeting him as he adjusted to the light. But his casual stride came to an abrupt halt. Leaning against his car, baton twirling lazily in his hand, was Officer Craig. His posture was relaxed, too relaxed. A smug confidence radiated from him, the kind of arrogance that came from knowing he held power and abusing it. Mike's expression shifted. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched at his sides. The baton, once a tool of law, was now just another weapon of intimidation. Craig smirked, his voice dripping with condescension. Craig, mocking, "Nice car. You steal it from some rich guy? Or did you win it in a rap battle? I know how you people do." You people. 2 words, enough to turn the air electric. Mike took a slow breath, his legendary discipline keeping his rage in check. But inside? Something primal stirred. Craig had no idea who he was playing with. Craig smirked, reveling in his own twisted sense of humor, completely blind to the shift in the air. Mike didn't flinch, but his stance changed, subtle, controlled. His eyes burned, his muscles coiled. The rage inside him was a storm barely held at bay. His voice, though calm, crackled with something dangerous. Mike, tight, controlled. "I didn't steal it. It's mine, bought and paid for." For the first time, Craig hesitated. The smirk flickered, just for a second. But then his expression hardened, his prejudice refusing to yield. His eyes narrowed into icy slits, doubling down on the lie he wanted to believe. Because men like Craig didn't see truth. They only saw what fit their version of reality. And right now, he was about to push the wrong man too far. Craig's prejudice dripped from every word, his sneer widening as he delivered the next blow, not with his baton, but with his voice. Craig, mocking, laughing. "Oh, yeah? You expect me to believe that? Someone like you, what, a washed-up bum, can afford this?" He chuckled, the sound hollow, cruel, loud enough for the bystanders to hear, loud enough to humiliate. "Craig, yeah, right. I've seen fairy tales more believable than that." The laughter echoed through the parking lot, but it couldn't hide the venom beneath. This wasn't just about the car. This was about power. Yet Mike stood firm, a statue of controlled fury. The fire inside him burned hot, but it didn't consume him. Not yet. Because unlike Craig, Mike knew what real control was. Without a word, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the proof. Mike's movements were slow, deliberate. No anger, no hesitation, just cold, hard proof. He extended the registration, his voice steady, controlled. "Mike, calmly. Here's my registration. See for yourself. The truth, clear as day, undeniable." But Craig? He didn't care. With a sneer, he snatched the paper from Mike's hand, his eyes burning with something far uglier than suspicion, pure hatred. And then, in one swift motion, he tossed it to the ground. Craig, snarling, "I don't need to see this. People like you shouldn't even be here." The words hit harder than a punch. The crowd murmured, uneasy. Mike's fists clenched at his sides, not out of fear, not out of defeat, but because he knew exactly where this was heading. Craig took a step closer, his voice laced with contempt, his words drenched in hate. Craig, scoffing, "This is a respectable place, not some ghetto." The statement hung in the air like a lit fuse. Hatred fueled by ignorance and power was a dangerous thing, and Craig wielded both. The crowd thickened, forming a silent circle around the confrontation. Whispers, phones recording, eyes locked on the 2 men. The weight of their attention only fanned the flames. Yet Mike didn't move. His face remained unreadable, his body a pillar of restraint in the storm of hostility. This wasn't his first battle. But every fighter has a breaking point. The tension swirled like a storm, thick, suffocating. But Mike held his ground, his response measured, a final attempt to diffuse the inevitable. His voice was steady, firm, but reasonable. Mike, calmly, "Officer, I don't want any trouble. Can I just get in my car and leave? I'm not looking to cause any problems." A plea for rationality. A chance for de-escalation. But Craig wasn't interested. His mind was already set on confrontation. His predatory grin widened as he took a deliberate step forward, the glint in his eyes revealing exactly what he wanted: power, submission, control. And if Mike wasn't going to hand it over willingly, Craig was ready to take it by force. The air crackled with tension, the storm of the moment swelling around them. Mike's voice remained measured, controlled, an anchor in the chaos. Mike, calm, firm. "Officer, I don't want any trouble. Can I just get in my car and leave? I'm not looking to cause any problems." It was a plea for reason, a final attempt to defuse the situation. But Craig, he wanted trouble. His lips curled into a predatory grin, his eyes gleaming with twisted satisfaction. He wasn't here for justice. He was here to exert control. Craig, mocking. "Not so fast? Let's see how you like a little inconvenience. Maybe you can explain things at the station." With deliberate slowness, he reached for his handcuffs, each movement calculated, meant to intimidate, to humiliate. Then, crack! The baton came down, shattering the headlight. Glass rained onto the pavement. A stunned silence fell over the crowd. A line had been crossed. Mike Tyson had spent a lifetime mastering control. But even the strongest walls can crumble. The parking lot fell silent. Craig's aggression had reached a dangerous new level, and the crowd stood frozen, horrified, yet unable to look away. Then, like a chain reaction, phones shot up. Screens lit the scene in cold, artificial light, every second recorded, every action documented. For a moment, there was only stunned silence. Then, a sound cut through the tension like a blade. Mike's voice, tight, controlled, but burning with rage. Mike, low, seething. "That's enough." Craig, however, wasn't done. Something inside him snapped, his baton swung again, and again. Each deliberate strike was an act of destruction, not just against the car, but against what it represented. A twisted, hateful attempt to break something he couldn't control. But what Craig didn't realize, he wasn't the only storm in this fight. Craig's baton slammed down again, his breath ragged, eyes alight with twisted satisfaction. Craig, growling, sneering. "There. Maybe now you'll think twice before coming back here." The once silent crowd shifted, their murmurs rising into a wave of disbelief and anger. What they were witnessing wasn't law enforcement, it was destruction. Phones held steady, cameras rolling. And at the center of it all, Mike Tyson stood still. His composure was a fortress, unshaken. But behind the calm, something burned. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, yet laced with an undeniable edge of steel. Mike, firm, warning. "Hey, that's enough. You've made your point. Just stop." But Craig? He wasn't listening. And now, he was about to learn what happens when you push a fighter too far. Mike took a step forward, his voice steady, controlled, a final attempt at reason. "Mike," measured, firm. "Let's be reasonable here." For a brief second, Craig hesitated. The weight of 100 eyes burned into him, the silent judgment pressing down like a heavy stone. The crowd wasn't just watching anymore. They were reacting. Murmurs turned into shouts of protest. The air grew thick with tension. But Craig? His grip on the baton tightened, his expression twisted into pure contempt. Craig, low, cold. "No, I don't think I have." Then, with a venomous sneer, the words that shattered the last thread of restraint. Craig, spitting. "You people need to learn your place." The crowd erupted, voices surging in anger, but Craig only saw one man. His eyes locked onto Mike, his obsession, his target. And Mike? He knew. This wouldn't end with words. Craig's smirk widened, his arrogance radiating off him like heat from pavement. He had power, and he knew it. With a lazy, almost dismissive flick of his wrist, he flicked his burning cigarette into the car. The ember landed on the pristine upholstery. A faint curl of smoke rose, twisting into the air like a cruel reminder of his malice. Craig took a slow step back, arms crossed, eyes cold. Craig, mocking smug. There. Maybe now you'll think twice about coming back here." The smoke rose higher, a bitter stain against the clear blue sky. And at that moment, something shifted. Mike Tyson's patience, his legendary restraint, snapped. For years, discipline had been Mike Tyson's shield. But now, that shield was cracking. His stance shifted. His composure, once ironclad, wavered under the weight of sheer, unrelenting disrespect. His jaw tightened. His fists curled. His breathing slowed. Then, in one smooth, deliberate motion, he reached down. The cigarette, still smoldering, was plucked from the upholstery between his fingers. "Mike," low, steady. "I've had enough of this." His voice was calm, too calm. He brought the ember down, pressing it firmly beneath his shoe, twisting it into the pavement. A final act of defiance. The crowd held its breath. Mike lifted his gaze, locking eyes with Craig. And for the first time, the predator saw something terrifying. Not anger, not rage, but the cold, calculated stare of a man who knew exactly what came next. Mike's gaze locked onto Craig, unwavering. His voice, once measured, now carried a weight that couldn't be ignored. "Mike, stern, resolute. I've tried to be respectful, but now you're crossing a line." A slow breath, his stance solid as stone. "Mike, you're a bully. You're not here to serve or protect. You're just here to spread hate. But I won't let you do that. Not to me, not to anyone." The crowd erupted, voices rising in unity. Their earlier murmurs of unease had transformed into outright protest. This wasn't just about Mike anymore. But Craig, he only saw defiance. And he hated it. His twisted grin widened as he stepped closer, violating every inch of Mike's space. The baton, now a weapon of intimidation, pressed cold against Mike's chest. Craig's voice was low, taunting. Craig, mocking. "And what are you going to do about it?" The tension hit its breaking point. Craig's sneer deepened, his voice soaked in pure contempt. Craig, mocking. "Oh, and what are you going to do about it? You're nothing but a bum. Always will be." The words hung in the air like poison, their weight heavy with hatred. But Craig wasn't just speaking to Mike. He was speaking to everyone like him. And the crowd, they had heard enough. The murmurs erupted into full-blown outrage. A tide of righteous fury surged forward. Some voices shouted encouragement, urging Mike to stand his ground. Others pleaded for someone, anyone, to call the real authorities. Chaos threatened to consume the moment, and at the center of it all, Mike Tyson stood still. His chest rose and fell in slow, deliberate breaths, not out of fear, not out of hesitation, but because he knew, once he moved, everything would change. Mike stood at the center of the storm, a man at a crossroads. Fight or walk away. Craig had pushed too far, and now, there was no turning back. In a flash of motion, Mike moved. His legendary instincts kicked in, honed from years in the ring. His hand shot out like lightning, snatching the baton mid-swing before it could strike. Clang! The sound of metal clashing against metal cut through the air like a gunshot. With one powerful tug, Mike ripped the baton from Craig's grasp, his sheer strength sending it clattering onto the pavement. Craig stumbled backward, eyes wide. For the first time tonight, he wasn't in control. And the look on his face? Pure shock. The crowd erupted. Cheers, shouts, and applause shook the air, their energy surging through the parking lot like a shockwave. Mike Tyson had just turned the tables. But Craig? He wasn't done. Humiliated, his pride in shambles, he charged forward blindly, fists clenched, eyes burning with fury. It was pure, reckless rage. Mike, however, was calm, focused, unshaken. Like quicksilver, he moved, fluid, precise, effortless. As Craig's fist came swinging, Mike sidestepped with the ease of a seasoned fighter. Craig's own momentum betrayed him, sending him stumbling forward, barely catching himself. Another miss, another failure. Frustration boiled in his veins. Mike, his voice steady amidst the chaos, offered one final warning. Mike remained calm, unwavering, his voice steady but firm. Mike, level, imploring. You don't want to do this, officer. You're a cop. You're supposed to protect people, not attack them. But Craig? He wasn't listening. His breath came ragged, his face flushed with rage, his pride shattered beyond repair. He began to circle Mike, his movements more animal than man, his eyes filled with a feral hunger. He needed to win. Then, he snapped. Craig lunged, throwing a wild brute force swing, aiming straight for Mike's jaw. But Mike was already moving. With effortless poise, he deflected the punch, his reaction honed by years of training, years of battle, and just like that, Craig was wide open. Mike saw the opening and took it, lightning fast, precise, deadly. His jab landed clean to Craig's ribs, a perfectly calculated strike, surgical in execution. Thud. Craig stumbled backward, gasping, his body folding from the impact. For the first time, pain replaced arrogance. Craig, gritting his teeth, seething. You're going to regret that. His fury boiled over. Desperation took hold. With a wild flourish, he ripped his taser from its holster. Electricity crackled. The sharp buzz filled the air, the weapon humming with pure, incapacitating force. But Craig wasn't aiming to subdue. This wasn't about law. This was personal. His finger squeezed the trigger. A hiss of electricity cut through the chaos, aimed straight at Mike. The sharp crackle of electricity filled the air as the taser prongs shot toward Mike. A direct hit could drop a man instantly. But Mike Tyson? He was faster. In a split second, his instincts took over. He leapt to the side, the prongs whizzing past, missing him by a hair's breadth. Craig's weapon was useless now, and before he could react, Mike struck. With explosive speed, he pounced. Craig's eyes widened in shock, his body too slow to react. Mike's hand clamped around his wrist, unshakable, unbreakable. With one swift motion, he ripped the taser away, disarming the officer in an instant. Then, in one fluid, decisive move, Mike used Craig's own momentum against him. With a powerful shift of weight, he flipped Craig over his shoulder. Crash. Craig's body slammed into the pavement. The crowd exploded, cheers and shouts filling the air. Mike had just turned the fight upside down. The parking lot erupted. Thunderous cheers, applause, and shouts of triumph filled the air as Mike brought Craig down hard. But Mike wasn't done. With calm, calculated control, he pinned Craig to the pavement, his weight pressing against the officer's back. A complete reversal of power. Craig struggled, but it was useless. Mike was in control now. The crowd, eyes wide, phones recording, hung on his every word. Mike, commanding firm. Somebody call the real police. This man needs to be dealt with. He's not worthy of that uniform. The crowd moved as one. Phones lit up, calls dialing in. The tables had turned. Craig had used his badge to intimidate and abuse. Now, justice was coming for him. Craig thrashed beneath Mike's weight, his desperation growing by the second. His voice, hoarse with rage, spewed a stream of expletives and insults, a pathetic attempt to claw back the authority he had abused just moments ago. Craig, spitting venom. "Let me go, you damn cuck! You don't know who you're messing with!" But Mike didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't even blink. Instead, he leaned in closer, his piercing gaze cutting through Craig's bravado like a blade. This man, who had once wielded his badge like a weapon, was now nothing but a desperate fool pinned to the ground. Then, a new voice cut through the chaos. Deep, commanding, unwavering. The crowd parted. The police chief had arrived. A commanding voice cut through the noise, brimming with authority and finality. Police chief, firm. "Step away from him, Mr. Tyson. Let me handle this." Mike, his job done, exhaled slowly before releasing his hold, stepping back as the real law took over. The chief, flanked by a squad of officers, surveyed the scene, his stern gaze falling upon Craig, a man now stripped of his power. In his hand, a tablet glowed, displaying the damning footage of Craig's abuse, aggression, and corruption, all caught on dozens of cameras. A testament to his crimes, a case that couldn't be ignored. As the chief strode forward, handcuffs in hand, Craig's face twisted from defiance to sheer panic. The full weight of the law had arrived. With a sharp metallic snap, the cuffs locked around Craig's wrists, a fitting end to his reign of terror. The crowd erupted, their cheers now a declaration of justice served. Craig was hauled to his feet, the cold bite of metal around his wrists a fitting symbol of his downfall. His head hung low, the once arrogant officer reduced to nothing but a disgraced shell of his former self. Where he once wielded power with cruelty, he now stood powerless, humiliated, defeated, forgotten. The crowd erupted, their voices a unified roar of triumph. This wasn't just justice for Mike Tyson, it was a warning. A cautionary tale for those who would dare to abuse their power. As the cheers echoed, the police chief turned to Mike, his expression solemn, his voice heavy with genuine remorse. "Chief, sincerely. Mr. Tyson, I deeply—" The police chief straightened, his voice steady, solemn, and firm. "Chief," with conviction. "Mr. Tyson, I deeply apologize for this officer's behavior. It is unconscionable, a disgrace to the badge he wears." He took a measured pause, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Chief, rest assured he will be held accountable." For the first time that night, there was clarity, not just justice, but acknowledgement. The chief extended his hand, not just as an apology, but as a symbol of solidarity, a statement that not all who wear the uniform stand for corruption. Mike studied him for a moment, his eyes shining with quiet determination. Then, without a word, he grasped the chief's hand in a firm handshake. A simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. Mike's grip was firm, his voice steady, unwavering, the voice of a man who had fought battles far beyond the ring. Mike, resolute. "Thank you, Chief. I just want people like him to know they can't get away with this." A pause. The crowd listened, felt every word. "Mike, people need to be held accountable, no matter who they are." His words carried the weight of experience, the scars of a life spent fighting, for respect, for equality, for justice. But the fight wasn't over. Weeks later, the scene had changed. No longer a parking lot, no longer the streets, but a courtroom, a new arena, colder, detached. Yet this time, justice wasn't just a possibility, it was inevitable. The once arrogant officer now stood in a starkly different position. Craig, his suit wrinkled, his confidence shattered, kept his eyes downcast, no longer the man who wielded his badge with unchecked power. The judge's voice cut through the silence, each word heavy with finality. "Judge, firm, authoritative. Mr. Craig, you are hereby charged with misconduct in office, destruction of property, and abuse of power." A pause. "Judge, how do you plead?" The courtroom was silent, the weight of justice pressing down. There was no way out. Meanwhile, outside the legal battle, a new fight had begun. Mike Tyson, once a champion of the ring, had now emerged as a champion for justice. The incident had transformed him, not just in the eyes of boxing fans, but as a symbol of resistance, strength, and change. Mike Tyson had always been a fighter. But now? His fight was bigger than the ring. His voice echoed through town halls, rallies, and community gatherings, a rallying cry for accountability, for justice, for real change. His words, shaped by a lifetime of struggle, carried the weight of experience and the fire of purpose. He wasn't just speaking, he was inspiring. Surrounded by a sea of supporters, Mike felt their energy, their gratitude, not for his knockouts, but for standing up when it mattered most. Behind him, his classic black convertible gleamed in the sunlight, no longer just a car, but a symbol of resilience, of triumph, of hope. Fans approached, their faces glowing with admiration. This was bigger than boxing. Mike's signature grin spread wide. Mike shook hands, exchanged words of gratitude, and posed for photos, the very image of strength and humility. He had been a champion in the ring. Now he was something even greater, a champion for justice. A young fan stepped forward, eyes filled with reverence. Fan, earnest, emotional. "You're a hero, Mr. Tyson. Thank you for standing up for what's right." Mike paused, letting the words settle. For a moment, he stood still, taking it all in. His mind drifted inward, reflecting on everything that had led to this moment. A serene smile crossed his lips. Because he knew the truth. Sometimes the best way to fight back is to let your actions speak louder than words. To stand up for what's right, even when the odds are against you. That's how you make a difference. Subscribe and like to be part of the movement.